Let's break down 6 running backs who are going to absolutely dominate week 2 fantasy football. These running backs either have fantastic matchups, an extreme amount of upside, or maybe did not have the best week 1 of fantasy football, but I think are going to bounce back in a large fashion in week 2. Overall, these running backs you cannot afford to have on the bench if you want to absolutely score the most points in week 2 and leave your league mates crying. So let's break down these 6 running backs and why they have to be in your starting lineup as we approach the week. Before we do so, let me remind you guys that Underdog is the place to be if you want to get in on additional fantasy football action all season long. Their week 2 pick'ems are already going live. And if you guys want to claim a free pick'em for the week, make sure to use promo code the catch down below. You will receive a free CeeDee Lamb over half of a total yard to use going into Sunday's action. And on top of that, you're also going to receive a 50% deposit match up to $1,000 when you use promo code the catch. That's up to $1,000 in bonus cash that you can use on Underdog towards any of their week 2 pick'ems. Let's break down the running backs that are absolutely set to dominate week 2 fantasy football. Let's kick off the video with the king himself, Derrick Henry, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Gave up the 26th most points to the running back position in week 1. Got absolutely torched by J.K. Dobbins. And here going into week 2, I think a lot of you guys are just like, yeah, I'm starting Derrick Henry. But man, after, the first game of the week last week on Thursday Night Football, like especially me who drafted a lot of Derrick Henry going into the year, was getting all kinds of like concerns and comments about what we're going to do with Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry is going to be just fine. 13 touches in this game, 46 total yards. Like I know the 3.5 yards per carry. It didn't look fantastic, and there were like points in this game. You're looking at Henry like he looks a little sluggish or whatever. Not involved in the receiving game. Obviously, Justice Hill is going to be the receiving back. Don't forget, Justice Hill had just 1 rushing attempt. He had 8 targets, but also the game script really benefited Justice Hill. I don't know if that's going to happen every single week. On the other hand, Derrick Henry's the clear-cut RB1 for the Ravens, and the game script did not benefit him in week 1 to getting more carries. The Ravens were playing from behind. Chris Jones was constantly in Lamar Jackson's face. That's why we saw him scramble so much, or at least part of it. He probably also just wanted to. But overall, like the game script here in week 2 at home against a Raiders defense that is nowhere near as good as the Chiefs defense that just got torched by J.K. Dobbins is going to be one of these weeks where we see Derrick Henry be Derrick Henry. I think it's going to be an absolutely great performance out of Derrick Henry. He's a player you cannot even start to consider to bench. So if you're doing so based on week 1, I just want to remind you, there's no reason whatsoever to bench Derrick Henry as we move into the week. I'm so confident in that I would head straight over to Underdog and take the over on Derrick Henry to score a touchdown and pair that with that free pick we talked about earlier that you can claim with promo code the catch while getting that 50% deposit match up to $1,000 on Underdog. I talked about taking Derrick Henry going into last week on Underdog. So take advantage of that here in week 2. Take Derrick Henry to score a touchdown, pair it with that free pick'em, boom, money. Let's move right along. All right, moving along, let's go from Derrick Henry to J.K. Dobbins. Let's go from matching up against the Raiders in week 2 to facing the Raiders in week 1, where, like I said, J.K. Dobbins absolutely torched the Raiders. Walked away on 10 touches with 135 rushing yards, 13.5 yards per carry, a touchdown, nearly had a second touchdown. I know some people are saying, like, you take away the long run or whatever, Dobbins' day wasn't as productive, but it's like, who cares? He had the long run anyways. 22.9 fantasy points, huge day, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 4 receiving yards. I will say Gus Edwards, still had 11 touches and 1 target in this game. He did not look like the Gus bus we were expecting going in to the season, I don't know. He looked awful. 10.36 yards per carry. I do think this is an opportunity here against Carolina where maybe, Gus Edwards could bounce back a bit here from that week 1 performance. But ultimately, I think they're going to ride the hot hand and continue to feed J.K. Dobbins in this matchup. I won't be surprised if both running backs come out of this game with 10 touches each. But this is just a beautiful matchup. This Carolina Panthers run defense is so bad. It was so bad last year. J.K. Dobbins, a player who was either on your bench in week 1, more than likely. Kudos to you if you started him, or was on the waiver wire. If you own J.K. Dobbins right now, I think J.K. Dobbins is a home run play in week 2, an absolute must-start player, a player you cannot afford to bench. The ceiling is way too high. Do not bench J.K. Dobbins moving into week 2. It is that simple. Next up, we got my guy Brian Robinson Jr. going up against the New York Giants, and I absolutely love this matchup for Brian Robinson, who had a great week 1, 17.9 fantasy points, 12 rushing attempts, 4 targets, had a touchdown. Wasn't super efficient on the ground. It was nice to see him get more involved in the passing game, but overall a good fantasy day, and that is what we care about. Here in week 2, a just beautiful matchup. This Giants defense all around is awful. I don't even think their run defense is as good as their ranking comes in because, the Vikings just didn't even really need to play offense at a certain point in that game. So, I just think that this defense is going to continue to be really bad for the Giants. And I think this is another smash spot at home. First home game for the Commanders for them to come out and really show what they're going to do offensively this season and continue to progress Jaden Daniels as a rookie quarterback. And I think Brian Robinson is going to be kind of the heartbeat of this team to, alleviate some of that pressure from Jaden Daniels. Now, 2 things to look at. You might be saying, well, Jaden Daniels is running the football all over the place. How does that impact Brian Robinson? And to a degree it does. I mean, Daniels had 88 yards on the ground, but going back to the beginning of this video, I'm not confident in Derrick Henry just because Lamar Jackson is going to run the football all over the place. These running backs are still going to get enough that they are going to be viable fantasy options. So, Jaden Daniels doesn't necessarily scare me off of Brian Robinson Jr., but maybe his upside is somewhat limited for that reason. But, 17.9 fantasy points in week 1. I'll take that on a weekly basis if I can get close to that average. The other thing is Austin Eckler's still hanging around. He was not good on the ground. 2 touches, 10 yards. I mean, that is 5 yards per carry, but ultimately was not super involved on the ground. It was obviously Brian Robinson Jr., who's the RB1 here. Eckler did have 4 grabs off of 4 targets for 52 receiving yards, but this is, still Brian Robinson Jr.'s backfield. He's still the lead back at the end of the day. So I'm not worried about Austin Eckler, not overly concerned about Jaden Daniels being the quarterback here. Smash matchup. It's a home matchup. Giants defense bad. Commanders defense bad. We want to look at this matchup as a whole for fantasy football moving into week 2. Brian Robinson Jr., smash play. Get him in your starting lineups as we approach the week. All right, next up, we've got Tony Pollard going against the Jets as we approach week 2. First home game for the Titans. I don't quite know. I think the Titans offense is going to be great in this matchup because Will Levis did not really give me any reason to believe that their offense is going to be great this season in week 1. But ultimately, what we did at least get proven is that Tony Pollard is the RB1 for the Titans. I don't really know if I'm going to look at this Titans backfield as a true committee or a split backfield. Maybe that pattern will change. We're only have gotten through week 1 here, but Pollard had 16 touches on the ground and 4 targets, where Tajay Spears had 4 touches on the ground and 4 targets. So, Tajay probably did enough that you're not super spooked off of him, and I do think he'll have moments and be involved in this offense. But in terms of on the ground, I think Tony Pollard is the RB1 for the Titans. Had a very efficient day, 5.13 yards per carry, 82 rushing yards, touchdown. Those additional 3 receptions helped the fantasy stat line to where he got to 18.4 fantasy points. The Jets' run defense is bad. I talked a lot about this going into week 1, although for the most part, we weren't overthinking it because we thought we were going to be starting Christian McCaffrey, and there's no way that you can bench him, although you ended up benching him anyway, so he didn't play. But Jordan Mason helped prove the point, right? I mean, no disrespect to Jordan Mason. He looked incredible, but also this Jets run defense was just bad last year. It was not good. A lot of people see the Jets as a matchup and they think, oh, that's a good defense. And secondary is good. The secondary is very good against opposing wide receivers last year, but the run defense was bottom 12 almost all season long last year, and they did not look up to the task in week 1, albeit they're on the road against one of the best, if not the best offense in the league. But still, once again, Jordan Mason came out and looked like Marshawn Lynch, and Isaiah Pacheco had a baby and threw it out there, and it was incredible, right? So Tony Pollard, once again, in week 2, I think can easily walk away with a double-digit fantasy performance and light up this Jets defense. Plus, on top of that, with what we saw out of Will Levis in week 1, there's no reason to believe that the Titans aren't going to, kind of rely on the run game as we approach the week. So good matchup on paper for Tony Pollard for sure. Should be a good game script for Pollard specifically. I don't know about the rest of the offense, and it's a home game for the Titans. So everything is here. Pollard should be the workhorse back. Great matchup. You can't afford to bench him. He's going to absolutely dominate week 2 fantasy football. Next up, let's talk about James Conner going up against the Rams defense at home. This is a matchup overall I like a lot for fantasy football as we approach the week. Good divisional matchup here. Both these defenses did not play great in week 1, and the Rams defense got absolutely torched by Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position in week 1. And now enters James Conner, man who never seems to age, RB9 in week 1. James Conner is only going into his 8th year, which for a running back feels old, but Conner looked like he's as good as ever, right? 16 touches, 50 yards on the ground, a touchdown, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 33 receiving yards. A guy who scores 19.3 fantasy points who you got late in your draft and is going to be your workhorse running back all year long. Listen, where you drafted Conner, you might be in a position where he doesn't necessarily need to be in your starting lineup, but I think this is way too good of a matchup to ignore. I think he's going to get 15 plus touches in this game once again, going to help this offense come out and have a big day. I like the Cardinals, like the Rams in this matchup. I think that we should be starting the primary starters on both teams as we approach the week, and that definitely includes James Conner. So great matchup here. It's a home game. I just don't see any reason why the volume would go down for James Conner in week 2. He's an absolute smash play. And I wanted to mention him because he got drafted later in drafts. And if you have him on your bench, I think you're going to end up regretting it. Let's get him in our starting lineups because I think he's going to absolutely dominate week 2 fantasy football. All right, last but not least, let's talk about Jerome Ford of the Browns, a player that made last week's video, a player that really all last week I encouraged you guys to start. And my main argument was that the volume should be really high for Jerome Ford going into week 1 against Dallas, and it wasn't great. He only had 12 rushing attempts, but he did surprisingly, at least for me, walk away with 7 targets, 6 receptions, just 25 receiving yards, but those 6 receptions helped the fantasy stat line here. And I know, like, overall, Jerome Ford was kind of looking like a week 1 bust, and then he had the garbage time touchdown, but hey, he had the garbage time touchdown. That's all we care about. He found the end zone, right? And no matter what, or no matter how you feel about the Browns offense, Deshaun Watson at quarterback after week 1, because it did look very bad. As long as Jerome Ford's the RB1 here, as long as Nick Chubb is on IR, and I think right now, if you're Nick Chubb, you're looking at this offense, you're in no way rushing yourself to come back out and play. But as long as Jerome Ford's the RB1, his volume is going to make him a viable fantasy option on a week in, week out basis. Listen to the schedule for Jerome Ford. Jacksonville this week, a bottom 10 unit against the run. The Giants, the Raiders, the Commanders, all bottom 10 units against the run in the next 4 weeks. So Jerome Ford is not going to be a player that we're benching anytime soon. He's a player who can end up in your flex, still bring a safe floor, still has a nice ceiling if he scores a touchdown. And here in week 2, even though the Browns are traveling to Jacksonville, this offense looked bad in week 1. Volume is king, and Ford is going to have that volume as we approach the week. So I think he is a great start, a player that once again got drafted a lot later than some of the other running backs we talked about in this video, and is a player who might be sitting on your bench right now who I think deserves to be in your starting lineup in week 2. He is set to absolutely dominate week 2 fantasy football and help you absolutely crush your league mate. So make sure he gets in to your starting lineup. That'll do it for today's video. There are 6 running backs who are absolutely going to dominate week 2 fantasy football. Don't forget, guys, if you have any fantasy football questions whatsoever, drop them in the comments down below. I will answer every single comment on this video and help you guys do whatever I can to bring home a victory in week 2 fantasy football. And don't forget, we have everything that you guys need for week 2 fantasy football. Start sits at running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, must start defenses, must start kickers, waiver wire additions, as well as live fantasy Q&A throughout the week, and other videos are going to help you guys absolutely crush week 2 fantasy football. So make sure you guys are checking out the videos. They should be on the screen at some point soon, and make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, as well as have joined our free Discord. That link is down below. That Discord is going to let you guys know when I'm going live to answer fantasy questions, when videos are going out. Plus, you can connect with the community and bounce fantasy questions off of them. Whatever we can do to help you guys absolutely dominate this fantasy football season, we are going to do. So with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.